Paul George says he's the clear-cut number 2 and Kawhi Leonard is the 1. Is he being a little humble there for how good he is? Or is that the kind of sacrifice and humility you need to be a championship team? Gonna talk about that and more on today's Locked On Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir, you are locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day, your team every day. I'm your host, Darian Vaziri, going into my 18th season as a Clipper fan. Also have my own YouTube channel known as Dime Dropper. It's also a podcast, Dime Dropper Podcast, where I talk about LA sports with a large focus on the Clippers and, of course, the NBA and its history at large. So give me a subscribe if you're into that. And of course, give a subscription to Locked On Clippers on YouTube. We are close to hitting 800 subscribers, and we're one of only 2 Locked On NBA channels that are not monetized. Clipper Nation, you already know how we do it. Let's get this channel to 1,000 subscribers. It's the only 5-day-a-week Clipper podcast, and I'm going to continue to give you the best I can. And today, that involves talking a little bit more about the preseason game against the Minnesota Timberwolves on Sunday night as we get ready for the last preseason game for the Clippers, and that's going to be against the Denver Nuggets on Wednesday night. So hopefully the Clippers see 2-time reigning MVP Nikola Jokic and experiment with Zoo guarding him in the small ball lineups. I'd like to see that. But for today's episode, going to be talking about Paul George with a big quote. He's the number 2. And of course, that may be like, you might be thinking, yeah, I mean, he's definitely the number 2. But there are just times where he looks like the best player on the court. And just to hear that from his mouth, so clear and concise, I'll say it publicly, as he said, is something we definitely want to talk about. And I also want to go in more depth about some things I saw the other night. And that includes Marcus Morris Sr. and how great he looked on both ends of the floor. Keywords, both ends of the floor. Robert Covington and Nicolas Batum and the versatility they gave the Clippers in that second quarter, as well as how they looked playing together. A little bit more Kawhi. And then looking at some potential things for the Nuggets and analyzing some Ty Lue quotes at the end. So let's start with Paul George and what we heard him say. And by the way, I want to say some things about the last episode. I wanted to make it clear. When I said Paul George, I don't like it when he starts out shooting threes. I prefer that he gets a mid-range or a free throw or a bucket at the rim to start the game to see the ball go in. I want to clarify. He did make his first his first shot, and that was a 3 in the right corner. But then after that, his next 3 shots, or maybe 4 shots, but at least the next 3 shots I know were threes. And 1 or 2 of them he could have taken to the basket. Now, some of them were good shots, like the one that John Wall penetrated in transition, dished, and then he got the ball in the swing. Good shot. But I think there were a couple times, like for example, one time there was 5 on the shot clock, and he had the ball isolating at the top, and he settled for a really tough contested 3. And I just think he could be getting to the rim there, or at least getting into the mid-range, trying to stop on a dime and pull. And because that's the thing about Paul George, he's so tall that he doesn't really get blocked on jumpers like that. So he can stop on a dime and pull going both directions. That's a skill that not that many people have. Not as many stars in the NBA have as you think to hit pull-ups on a dime going both ways, contested. Not just coming off of screens. And Paul George is one of those guys. So I'd like to see him be a little more aggressive there. But the quote, I've been saying for the longest time that I want Paul George to believe he's a number 2. Just because I think Kawhi Leonard is the guy. He's been there, done that. He's the 2-time Finals MVP. But really, since the 2016-17 season, he's been a top 5 player in the league every season he's been healthy. In 2017, he was top 5. No question about it. 2019, you could argue he was the best player in the world. Top 3 bare minimum that season. And then 2020, yes, he didn't perform very well in the playoffs. I shouldn't say the playoffs. In the second round, really. Especially those last 3 games. Or should I say the last 2 games? But he was still top 5 in the NBA at minimum that season plus playoffs. Even if you put it all together, he was still one of the last 8 teams standing. And everybody knows that should have been one of the last 4 teams standing. And then 2021, clearly a top 5 player. So every season since that season, he's been a top 5 player in the league. Paul George been elite, been in the top 10 conversation, been top 15 since maybe 2013-14 every season he's been healthy. But he just hasn't reached that level of Kawhi Leonard and may never reach that level, and that's okay. And he seems to acknowledge that, even though when you just look at the skill in terms of how the game comes to them, like how easy it can come to them and who looks smoother on a television screen or who looks smoother when you watch it with your own eyes, Paul George is a silky smooth, aesthetically pleasing basketball player as we have in the NBA. I mean, Kawhi Leonard is a little stiffer, even though he's added a lot more wiggle to his game in terms of his handle, especially over the years. Paul George is just that smooth operator, like a Tracy McGrady. This is the way he scores. It's just so effortless. He's got that size, the long arms, the gracefulness. He's just, when he gets going, it's just there aren't many better players in the league to watch. And that's not even me just being the Clipper fan that I am. That's me just being unbiased. I thought this before he was on the Clippers. But I think it's the occasional inefficient games compared to Kawhi, who's a lot more consistent in terms of shooting well from the field. And I think that's in large part due to what I talked about in the last episode. A lot of threes that he shoots, whereas Kawhi, he gets a lot of those bully ball buckets, mid-range, 10-footers, backing a guy down to the point where he's almost inside the key for those turnarounds. And I think that's a great, again, I'm a huge fan of embracing the post. I mean, I am not a 90s, 80s baby or whatever. Well, I am technically I was born in the 90s, but I still grew up in an era in the 2000s where post game was a thing for a lot of players. And I love that Kawhi Leonard does that. I still believe that it's an easy way to score. Everyone says it's inefficient now, but I think that's because it's not emphasized in terms of teaching at youth basketball. I saw it when I was coming up, getting taught by some trainers, not going to name names, but guys that have grown to train NBA players now. Post game, I was a smaller guard, so that's not something I was really taught, but I could see the evolution of the game in terms of big men starting to be taught more face-up skills as opposed to back-to-basket skills. And I think that translates into players being more inefficient at post-game because not as many of them are taught it as much anymore. It's not an emphasis anymore. But the guys that do it at a high level, Brandon Ingram, Nikola Jokic, DeAndre Ayton, Joel Embiid, Kawhi, even Paul George at times, they're just it's their bread and butter. You know what I'm saying? It's a science for them. And I think that's the reason why Kawhi Leonard is a more consistent and better player. And then obviously it's the main thing. I don't want to make it seem like Paul George isn't mentally tough and one of them ones, because he's to be in the conversation for a top 15 player in the NBA out of all the millions and millions of players that play basketball, you have to be so incredible in every facet when it comes to skillfully, athletically, mentally, all of it. But there are just levels to this. And I think that Kawhi's kind of Terminator focus, that mentality he has that you just can't really teach, it's just there, is what puts him over the top in terms of his difference with Paul George. I don't really think it's a skill thing. I think, Kawhi you can argue he's a little more fundamentally sound, but I don't think that's what it is. I think it's really that he's just a Terminator. And Paul George is like, I don't even want to say, I'm not going to be like a Laker fan or a hater that says, oh, he's mentally weak. That's insane. To make it to the NBA, you have to be a certain level. But I think at times he can be in his own head a little more than a guy like Kawhi. Simple as that. And he's admitted it. He's admitted that in the past he's had, struggles with mental health, as every single human has, really, in my opinion. I feel like there's no way Kawhi hasn't either. Like, everyone goes through that kind of stuff. But obviously, it really affected Paul George's game, and we saw it in the bubble. So, and at times, Paul can tend to get a little rattled, it seems, those free throws in the conference finals. But he's really proven, as I've said on so many podcasts, that ever since Ty Lue's taken over, he's just back to that really confident, I'm Paul George, I'm that dude, and nobody can guard me. And I think that that's why the Clippers are going to be incredible this season if Paul and Kawhi stay healthy, because I trust Paul now. And when he first came to the Clippers, I wasn't really fully sold on Paul in terms of getting us to that championship level. But now I really am. But I do think Kawhi's still that guy. Now, you might be saying, especially if you've listened to me recently, didn't you say that Paul George was going to be the best player for the Clippers through the first 20 to 30 games? I still believe it. And I think that the points per game is not going to be that big a difference. I think it's going to be like 24, 25 each, right around the same level. Paul George may even be at the 26 mark or the 24 mark, and Kawhi at like 22 to start the season. But I think it'll finish around 1 or 2 points difference between each other in terms of their overall points per game. But in the playoffs, I think that's when Kawhi Leonard, if they're healthy both, is going to show that he is not just the best player on the Clippers, but maybe the best player in the entire league. And that's assuming that Kawhi gets back to that level. But what I've seen so far from him in preseason, I think he definitely will get back to that level. And again, I think it's mainly because his game is not super predicated on athleticism and burst and bounce. He's super fundamentally sound. He's got that bully ball aspect, as I just said. And that's the way I think he's going to stay really, really good, even with the coming off the ACL tear. But I still think there is a level of humbleness that Paul George said that. I still think that he believes on a given night he can be that guy, and by all means, and absolutely he will be that guy on a given night where he will be the best player on the floor, not just the best player on the Clippers. And you might be thinking it doesn't have to be 1 and 2. It could be 1A, 1B. Absolutely. But I'm a big fan, and that's, if the Clippers win a championship and you can hardly tell who the best player is, I'm all for it. I would love if Paul George won a Finals MVP. But sometimes it's nice to have defined rules and have a guy say, you know what, when push comes to shove, Clippers in a drought, let's go to Kawhi first. And if he doesn't hit it, okay, we go to Paul next. But I like having Kawhi just that when the July 5th news came out, I was ecstatic about both, obviously, but it was really Kawhi Leonard. I mean, this is the guy we saw lead the Raptors to a chip. And Paul George still hasn't reached the finals yet. And hopefully, buying into this number 2 role mentally, he will get to that level. Because I said it before, and by the way, another correction I wanted to make from the last episode, I said Klay Thompson's been at number 2 on multiple championship teams. Not true. I contradicted myself in the own sentence. Andrew Wiggins was the number 2 on this championship team. So Klay was that number 2, I'd say, in 2015. But you can also make an argument for Draymond. But that being said, Paul George has been in all those guys I just named, and he says he's the number 2, and I believe he can be the number 2 on a championship team. But to be a number 2 on a championship team, you need a number 1, and we have that with Kawhi Leonard. But besides those 2, you need a supporting cast to do it. And the supporting cast guys, Marcus Morris, Nicolas Batum, Robert Covington, were excellent in the Minnesota game. And I'm going to be talking a little bit more about their performances coming right up. Let me tell you something about Built Bar. I finally got the damn thing, and it was better than I expected. If you don't have it, you're depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor. I haven't even tried it yet. I'm dying to, though. Delicious, indulgent cookie dough. And the thing about all Built Bars are, they are all covered in 100% chocolate. So they really taste more like a chocolate bar or a candy bar than your typical protein bar. I compared the raspberry flavor to like the Brookside dark pomegranate, the dark chocolate pomegranate things. That's what it kind of reminds me of. It just kind of has this chewy interior and that chocolate on the outside. And the cookie dough chunk puff has a really chewy texture. It has real cookie dough chunks. And it has all the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. And plus, it's healthy for you because all Built Bars have 15 grams of protein. Some actually have, the cookie dough chunk puff has 15 grams of protein, but some have 18. And the cookie dough chunk puff also only has 160 calories. Just go to Built.com and use the promo code LOCKEDON15 to get 15% off your order. That's LOCKEDON15. Okay. Supporting cast. A thing that all stars need to win championships, or as Shaquille O'Neal likes to call them, the others. And some of those others are Marcus Morris Sr., Nico Batum, and Robert Covington. I'm going to start out by talking about Marcus Morris Sr. He's a guy that I've given a little bit of harsh criticism to, you could say, in these podcasts, because I said that I felt his presence on the team is redundant. We don't need more guys that only score and do nothing else but space the floor. If their shot's not falling, where are they going to impact the game? I've said all those things about Senior. Even though I really like the guy, please don't get it twisted. I am not one of those Clipper fans that think he's not good. I need him off the team now. I think Marcus Morris Sr. has had great moments for the Clippers, both in the regular season and the playoffs. I think he's really embraced being a Clipper. He re-signed with the Clippers. I mean, why wouldn't he? It was a really solid contract. And he's really enjoyed it, I think. And I really like what he's given to the team. I just want to win the championship. And all my comments, guys, are always about what I think is best to win the championship. And I may not always be right. I'm not a GM. I'm just a fan that loves the Clippers a lot and pays a lot of attention to them and has watched basketball for a while very closely. So take that for what it's worth. That's why I like hearing from you guys as well. And by the way, I want to hear from you guys. Let me know. What were your thoughts on Paul George's comments about being the number 2? Make sure to comment that on the pinned comment on the YouTube channel after you subscribe, of course. But let's talk about Marcus Morris. He looks really, really good so far. He said he His knee feels great, and these are the first preseason games he's played for the Clippers. He's had knee issues going into each of the last 2 seasons for the Clips, and oh boy, does he look a little quicker. I talked about last night, he had one play where he ripped through, stopped on a dime at the elbow because he had his guy thinking he was going all the way to the rim, and he caught him off balance, pulled up, hit. I haven't seen Marcus Morris Sr. hit it with a rip through where he really gets the step, gets the guy on his hip, and then stops. Usually he kind of catches the ball in that mid-post area or even the three-point area, does a couple of jab steps, and pulls right over without even taking a dribble. This was like a little bit of more, okay, I'm about to get to the rim on you. Psych, I'm about to pull up for the mid-range. And that looked like, I thought I saw a little more spring in his step against Maccabi Ra'anana, but then I said I wanted to see it against NBA competition. And oh boy, and congratulations to Senior for having a kid. Oh boy, he looked good against Minnesota. And he talked about, I need some more dunks this year. I haven't been dunking. And then I really thought about it, and I was like, this guy is definitely, he does not dunk like that. And that's part of the biggest reason why he doesn't deter guys at the rim, or hasn't, and he hasn't gotten as many rebounds as you'd expect from the second tallest guy in a lot of Clipper lineups. But he looks a little more springy. He said he is, and he dunked on a fast break last night, or I'm sorry, on Sunday night. And what I really liked about it was a type of fast break where Marcus Morris Sr. a year or two ago stops at the three-point line for a transition three. Instead, I think he wanted the dunk. He filled the lane like James Worthy in the 80s, right down the left side, and Paul George dropped it off to him, and he took one dribble and slammed it down with 2 hands, and the reaction from the bench was priceless. Terrence Mann almost got a technical, because remember, they're being very strict about players standing up on the bench this year. You're probably going to see a lot of annoying technicals about that. But the Clippers thankfully didn't get one. But Terrence Mann and the rest of the bench stood up. It was really funny. You could tell that they obviously were joking about the whole Marcus Morris Sr. not dunking thing. But overall, we're talking Senior, 5 for 7 from the field, 3 for 4 from 3 in 22 minutes. He had 13 points and also 4 rebounds. And the most impressive thing about him, the way he was sliding his feet on defense. I even rewatched the first 3 quarters again, and he was sticking with just about everybody. Karl-Anthony Towns, D'Angelo Russell, Anthony Edwards. And I described that there was one play in the last episode I said where he got away with some hand checking, but he slid his feet very well. There were other possessions where he didn't use hands at all. He just slid his feet beautifully. And he was really sitting down in a stance. I mean, I was just like so impressed with his effort in a preseason game. So he clearly's heard the people like myself. And he's like, all right, you about to see this season. And if Marcus Morris Sr. can be great on both ends of the floor, then good luck everybody else. That's all I got to say about that. There's going to be no problem with him starting. And speaking of him starting, what I really like about another unit the Clippers have is that switch everything, wings only unit. And it's 6 players. You can even stretch it to 7 if you want to get a little caffeinated, if you know what I mean. But Amir Coffey, Terrence Mann, Robert Covington, Nico Batum, Kawhi, Paul George, and Senior are 7 dudes who you can put any 5 of them on the court, and they're going to have the ability to switch 1 through 5 on other teams, as well as basically any unit in the league. And that is an incredible luxury to have. It's going to force a lot of teams to play isolation. And you saw a little sneak peek of that in the Minnesota game with that lineup as the second quarter was kind of coming to a close of Rocco, Nico, Kawhi, Paul George, and Senior. And they were just doing a great job, active hands. And obviously, every single one of them can shoot and can shoot from 3. So that stretches the defense out as well. And it was causing some problems. It was definitely causing some problems. Robert Covington had a couple of nice blocks rotating. And Nico Batum and Robert Covington do a great job spacing the floor. One thing I really like about Nico, though, is that he has the ability when guys run him off the line to put the ball on the floor and make a play because he's got that high basketball IQ. There were a couple of times where they closed out pretty hard on him and he got right to the rim for a layup or dunk. And overall, obviously, his defensive IQ is still very high. He had 5 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal in 13 minutes of play. He was 2 for 4 from the field, 1 for 3 from 3. And then Robert Covington, obviously liked a lot of what I saw from him. Good defense. Even, he has a really long wingspan, so he's going to get some blocks this season for sure. And he's had some really impressive ones in the preseason thus far. And obviously his ability to space the floor. And one thing I've really noticed about Rocco as well in the games that we've had him, he moves well without the ball too. So you can kind of add him to that Terrence Mann, Luke Kennard, Ivica Zubac's Nico list. He moves without the ball, especially cutting baseline. And that's a really great thing to have guys moving off the ball because all eyes are going to be on Kawhi and Paul George when they isolate in certain situations. And it's going to be great to have a guy in that dunker spot. Also for pick and roll dump downs. When teams blitz at the top and Zubac catches the ball in that short roll, I bet you're going to see a lot of him finding Rocco, and not just Zoo in that short roll, Terrence, anybody that can set that screen in that short roll. If teams blitz on those 4-on-3 reads, Rocco's going to be cutting baseline a lot, and I think he's going to get a lot of buckets off of that kind of stuff. So Robert Covington looked good. The only thing I said about him last episode, and I still mean it, sometimes he takes threes that aren't necessarily open and not great shots where I think he can be a bit more patient and just swing the ball around. But besides that, I got no other criticism of Rocco. I think he's going to be fantastic. 11 points for him, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks, 4 for 8 from the field, 2 for 6 from 3. But coming up to end it out, I'm going to be talking briefly about Ty Lue. He said something about the lineup, or he wanted some of his rotations involving Ivica Zubac and what he's looking for with the switch everything kind of units. We'll be talking about that, plus a little look at what we want to see in the Denver game coming up. On opening night, I'm taking LeBron James to score more than 25 points, taking Steph Curry to hit more than 5 threes, and I'm taking Andrew Wiggins to have more than 5 rebounds. And where am I doing this? I'm submitting my entries at Prize Picks. How does it work? I pick 2 to 5 players, and I see if they'll score more or less than the Prize Picks projection. And I can win up to 10 times my money on the entry. And it's not competing against anybody else. It's not betting. It's just you and the projection available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport. It could be baseball. The playoffs are on right now. World Cup is coming up if you're a soccer fan. And, of course, basketball and more. And entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. It does not take too much of your time. Just download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Just don't forget to enter the promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. That's locked on in all caps. All right. It's time to close things out by talking about a little something that Ty Lue was saying. And that is something I referred to in the last episode about the small ball lineups and the versatility that he wants with them. And Ivica Zubac is going to check out of games around the 6-minute mark, not the 4 or 3-minute mark that he was checking out of basically all of last season. He's going to come out a little earlier, and the Clippers are going to go with that small ball, switch everything unit while Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are still in the game. And they're going to do that, obviously, to muck things up, make teams play isolation, and to spread the floor, of course. And when they do that, they'll then put Ivica Zubac in with the second-string guys to probably play against a backup big on the other team. So with all that evidence being said, with all that evidence, I've concluded that Moussa Diabate, as much as we like him, he's not going to be in the regular rotation. And that's kind of what we expected. I mean, there's 11 players, not counting Moussa and not counting Amir Coffey, that are supposed to be rotation players. So it's the only reason we mainly wanted a backup big was because just in case Zubac gets hurt or he's load managing or just he's played a lot of games and they're resting him on a night. I don't want to use the term load managing because I don't want to scare you guys into thinking that Ivica Zubac is going to be load managing back-to-backs or something like that. But just saying their occasional rest day, because Zubac tends to play a lot, and he's going to have a big role on this team, even if he's going to play about the same amount of minutes because of the small ball versatility, or maybe even a minute or two less. He's still the only true center that's going to be playing minutes. So I think he has a big role on this team, especially to start games. I'm still a big believer. Obviously, closing games is more important, but I'm still a big believer that to start a game, you can lose a game in the beginning. I don't think you can win a game in the beginning, but I fully think you can lose because giving teams confidence with easy baskets in the beginning, these are pros. There have been games of my 18 years as a Clipper fan where we're playing against a trash team, and when I say trash, I mean for NBA standards, and you give guys that just are not those guys open shots at the beginning of the game and they start feeling themselves, and then they start turning into Steph Curry, and then you're in trouble the rest of the night. So, and the Clippers have done a lot of these kind of things on these afternoon games the last couple of years. But mainly the takeaway is you're going to be seeing a lot of switch everything personnel. You're not going to be seeing a backup center. You're going to be seeing a lot of Ivica Zubats and no other center besides him playing in the rotation most games. And the main thing that people need to realize, and the Clippers need to realize themselves, and I'm sure they do, the one weakness, besides obviously if the team has a true post guy like a Jokic or an Embiid that can dominate us in the interior, the rebounds. No rebounds, no rings. One of my favorite phrases in all of basketball from the great Pat Riley. And the Clippers need a gang rebound. With nobody over 6'9" in that lineup, and any of those guys, Rocco, Terrence, Kawhi, Paul George, Nico, none of them are 6'10". They need an all gang rebound. Everybody needs to box out. There was one play where Kawhi, Paul George, and I think it was Rocco, it was in that small ball lineup. They were just standing around watching, and Anthony Edwards just came in the middle of all three of them and got an offensive rebound and scored. That just can't happen in the regular season at all. Boardman needs to do his boardman thing. And I think he will. Kawhi is actually one of the better rebounding forwards in the NBA, in my opinion, with those big hands, and he's got that aggressiveness and good timing. A lot of rebounding is timing. But that's the main thing. Got a gang rebound. But Ty Lue's comments just really overall make you realize that he's going to be all in on this small ball kind of lineup or kind of scheme. And that it's not going to be too much if it's Zubats and true centers. So he's going full on with this switch everything scheme. And the Clippers are really buying into it. And that's why they went out and got all those wing players. And remember, if you listen to my Jerry West sit down, which you can find on Dime Dropper YouTube channel, he talked about how the Clippers just have so many wing players that can guard multiple positions that's really disruptive for defenses. And Jerry West, well, he knows a little thing or two about basketball. So take that for what it's worth. Anyway, Ty Lue, this is the direct quote, by the way. Shout out to Law Murray of The Athletic for always giving us good content. But he said the 5-wing lineup, we don't know how to play out of it yet, he says. But I think that, I think he liked what he saw, and overall, they're going to keep getting better. And when he says don't know how to play out of it yet, I think that means more offensively because it's not a true playmaker in there. But man, I know I haven't mentioned him in this episode because I did so much raving about him in the last night episode. John Wall. Oh boy. When you talk about playmaking, it's going to be fun with him. But it's going to be also fun this entire season. And to follow this ride, you got to follow Locked On Clippers on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or any of your podcasting platforms that you use. But of course, to subscribe on YouTube and remember to answer today's question. What do you think of Paul George's comments about being the number 2? I know he has said that Kawhi's that guy in the past, but these were really like, Kawhi's better than me, and I'm okay with it kind of comments. And I haven't heard that from him yet, and I really like that. I mean, he's just grown so much. Even in his years with the Clippers, he's made less. I remember in the beginning, I had a huge problem with him making excuses, but he's really taken accountability and just been a real pro and a real guy that's embraced the Clipper identity, and I really love that about Paul. And he's grown on me ever since. If you go back to my old content, I was very anti some stuff that Paul did, and I was like not a huge fan of him on the Clippers, but he won me over. And it happens. I mean, I'm a fan, and I have my own emotions too. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to hide it. And I've learned that even though I try to be as unbiased as possible on this podcast, you seem to like me being a fan and saying we. And I've gotten criticized for being too friendly about other teams. So I'm a fan out like you guys want me to, clearly. Clipper Nation. You know what they say, clip gang or don't bang. Anyways, make sure to subscribe. Dime Dropper Podcast and Locked On Clippers. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Dime Dropper Pod. Clippers, Nuggets, Wednesday night. Enjoy it. Let's see what the Clips can do. Hopefully we can see a little bit of that small ball unit and Ivica Zubats playing against the MVP, Nikola Jokic. And number 27's back, ladies and gentlemen, Jamal Murray. Ugh, bad memories with him. Peace out, everybody. And you know the age-old proverb, go Clippers.